Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, and welcome to another week of our Astro Chat. Today we're going to be talking about the upcoming new moon, which will be on March 2nd. For those of us here in Texas, that'll be at 11:34 in the morning. Over in the UK, it'll be at 5:34, or as I was recently informed, 17:34 if you're doing that time frame, military time. And then, of course, over in Finland, that would put it at 7:34 p.m. We're looking at the new moon will be in Pisces, 12 degrees, 6 minutes Pisces to be exact. And in a couple minutes, we're going to go into talking about the Pisces energy, the new moon, the aspects. But before we do, a little disclaimer that we're filming this pretty close to when it's going to air, which means that the three of us are all being impacted and affected by world events, by things happening over in the Ukraine and elsewhere. So if that is something you don't want to hear right now, if you feel like that could be a trigger, we wanted to let you know. Also, none of us are trained mundane astrologers, but as we three of us were talking earlier, everything is connected in astrology. And even though our focus may be karmic, psychological, evolutionary, feminist, it's impossible to not be connected to what's going on in the world around us and to know some of mundane astrology and see the parallels. So I'm sure that as we talk, a lot of this will be coming through. I also want to do a disclaimer that we're talking about the new moon in Pisces, and we're going to see several planets in Pisces as well as the sun, the moon. And for me, when I'm in a period where there's a lot of Pisces energy, I feel myself open up, which can be beautiful, but can also be emotional. So I don't know what's going to happen as the three of us are talking, but I would expect that a lot of our emotions, both personal and with what we see happening on the world stage, might be coming through. So it's bound to be an interesting and intense discussion. All right. Jumping in, let's just start off talking by the fact that we're looking at the new moon phase. We always talk about the phase. And of course, we've been focusing on new moons and full moons with this Astro Chat podcast. New moon, we've talked about before. If you go back and listen to any of our other new moons, they'll start off with some in-depth stuff about that new moon phase. I want to talk about one element of a new moon phase, and that's the fact that the moon often represents our body in astrology. It's many things, but one of those many things it can be is the connection with the body. And I feel like in a new moon, it is a great time to really get in touch with what's going on with my body. Do some somatic healing, if you're familiar with those terms, getting in touch with what am I holding on to? What do I need to maybe release? New moons for me, just like a full moon, are a like betwixt and between space, right? I'm leaving the waning, the darkening phase of that moon, of those 2 weeks, and I'm entering the waxing, the enlarging, the growing phase of the moon during the next 2 weeks. And so, as we stand at this threshold with a foot on each side at this new moon, it just feels like it is a great time to really get in touch with what emotions are being held in the body. I'll talk about that more at the end when we do our tips and tricks and techniques. But I just think that, it's easy to be caught up with what's happening in the world. And with a new moon, it's a perfect moment to kind of step out of what's happening with the world. And what is it that I want to sink into? Remember, we've talked before about new moon energy is about sinking in, getting in touch with our deep unconscious, And so here, what are some of those unconscious feelings that maybe are being held in the body? That's sort of my focus, if you will, on the new moon, but I don't want to be the only one to talk. So I'm going to open that floor to see what you guys want to say about new moon energy before we move into Pisces.
So what I love about new moon, but then I love anything about conjunction with the sun, which what the new moon is it feels like a new cycle. And this is how I see astrology. That is just a language of cycles and the rhythms that we go through. And new moon is just a monthly new cycle that opens up. So it brings with it freshness, and it brings hope that again something new can emerge, that something new can be planted. It's the same way we wait for the new year, and the winter we go through that darkness and we kind of let go of things. We do plan for the new year. This is the energy that comes every month with the new moon. You let go in the balsamic moon, you let go of things, and you have opportunity to plant new seeds, to dream new dreams, and to have another intention for the next 30 days. That's how I see all the new cycles that starts. Something new starts. And what I love about astrology is that it shows us that those cycles start every now and then. You don't have to wait to new year on the 1st of January if you're in a Western world, or your birthday, to start a new cycle. You can look at what's happening in the world of astrology and see what energies are being refreshed and renewed. And this is something that I see with the new moon. I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
I think it was a lot of what I wanted to say about the new moon, but I think that I haven't been as doing a lot of karmic astrology. I haven't been focusing enough on the moon, on the cycles, and exploring them more and more. Also, I explored my new moon charts for every month now, and kind of check in with my new moon in my own sign. So this gives you another perspective of how you can use these cycles. So it's really, it's a new start again in the month.
Yeah, and we have that new start in a sign of Pisces. So again, the moon will start a new cycle in each zodiac sign throughout the year. So the sun will move to a new sign in a month, and then you have this new moon in the next sign, bringing new energy, new vibe. For me, the new moon in Pisces, the new cycle starts around our spirituality, our beliefs, what we hold dear on that kind of spiritual level, if we do have that spiritual life, because not everyone obviously do. It also talks about connectivity to the collective. So Pisces, for me, it's the sign that talks about collective feeling, collective zeitgeist, the trends that's happening, whether they're happening in Instagram, whether they're happening in a political world, whether they're happening in a fashion world, the trends that like a Piscean water just comes and goes, and then the new trend comes in, and then we have that beginning on a new moon in Pisces. Piscean waters are also waters of sometimes pain. They are waters of vision and illusions. So both, we can have a beautiful vision, like a mistake, it's the possibility of seeing more and being connected to everything. But also at the same time, when you are being connected to everything, to the world at large, to the emotion that's happening in the world at the moment, you can feel incredibly sensitive. sensitized to everything, and you might want to shut down. And that's another kind of sign of Pisces, when we're trying to shut down through the use of drugs, alcohol, and anything that will try to dump down our sensitivity and protect us from the overwhelming feeling that that's happening. So new moon in Pisces for me is always tricky, because it has this kind of fluidity, sensitivity. And if you're not prepared to be that open and to be that sensitive, and you don't know how to handle that, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And then when it's overwhelming, it can be incredibly destructive as well, because we might want to go down the route of just shutting our sensitivity down in not the healthiest way. And the last thing that I'm going to say as well about Pisces is the visions can become illusions. So this is the new moon and the new cycle where it can be creative and beautiful and amazing for spiritual retreat, but it can also lead us a path of delusion. And we might think that we're going on to this amazing quest, and actually we're completely being blue. And then we have a hard time when we meet reality, when we meet that Saturnian reality. So yeah, this is an interesting month, and I'm always curious and hesitant around the new moon in Pisces.
That's beautiful. Anne, what are you, as you say, the fishes with Pisces, what are you thinking or feeling as you are looking at this new moon chart about the Pisces?
Well, like Monica said, I mean, Pisces is the most sensitive maybe of all signs. And still, I also I look a lot on that Jupiter that's close to the Sun too, because I feel it's an inspiration, but it can also be very hard to find the best with things. It can be very hard to know the limits with this figure. And I think also, like with the Pisces energy, it's so much up to the person too. I think it's good to question yourself about, how do I react to Piscean energy? Do I have it in my chart? Is this familiar to me? Because that will also tell how you deal with this archetype in your own life and how you can use it. I mean, for somebody that's very into Piscean things, or like a musician or artist, they can make so much out of this. But someone that's maybe more going in the practical sense, or for them this might feel more like confusion, or like it's harder to get the positive things out of it. So I think it's a lot about how you feel connected to this energy in your own chart and in your own life.
That's so true. Yeah. How we're feeling and resonating with it based on our natal chart is such an important piece of this. For me, I think everything both of you guys said totally applies. But I also am going to add to that, for me, the challenge with Pisces is it encourages a disconnect from physical reality. You know, it is about, I want to step into spirituality. I want to step into fantasy. I want to step into things that maybe take me beyond the veil, that take me out of mundane day-to-day life. And, you know, just going back to what we said when we opened up, if I'm in a place of opening up and dropping and surrendering to, you know, spirit or my higher self or some great vision that I have, if I'm opening up to all that, and suddenly I look out and the world is on fire, or the world is embattled, and there's all this harshness and all this pain and all this suffering, I think that can often be the push to retreat, to pull away in the not so positive sense. And I like what you said, Monika, about it being fluid, because I find that when Pisces is being activated, it isn't that I'm all so spiritual and that's the only direction I'm going. And it isn't that I'm all about escapism and that's the only direction. It's the two fish, right? We're going back and forth. I'm in a dream state and I'm having a great day and I'm having visions. And then all of a sudden I'm depressed and disillusioned because I can't seem to manifest and make them a reality. And then I'm, back into being open-hearted. And so this back and forth, and I have to just say, with all the Virgo in my chart, when my Pisces opens up, I struggle with that fluidity. I like rigid. I like my organized boxes. So for me, that's the biggest challenge is with Pisces is this not so much the opening up, but opening up on these other levels while I'm still living in a very physical 3D mundane world reality, which now as I'm opening up makes that reality feel much more harsh, maybe much more painful than it would have if I'd kept a little of my guard up. And so, yeah, I just think that it is beautiful and it offers us all this potential, but being beautiful and having potential isn't without pain. And so I feel like the thing with Pisces is to work with it is what am I plugging into? If I'm unplugging from physical reality so that I can be in this very fluid place, what am I plugging into? If I have something spiritual, if I have maybe a connection with nature, if there's something that I can actually connect, then I'm unplugging in a healthy way and plugging into something else versus just pulling away and either hibernating or escaping or doing those unhealthy forms. So I kind of feel like it'll be interesting to see how people feel during the coming week with all this Pisces energy. And that brings me to, if you guys are okay with me moving on, talking about the stellium. So we have not only the sun and the moon in Pisces, right, at 12 degrees of Pisces, but we have, as Anne was mentioning, Jupiter at 14 degrees in the middle. And then we have Neptune at 22 degrees at the end. And like Anne, I'm very focused on that Jupiter. I remember Donna Cunningham talking a lot about stellium. So in fact, she has she had, I believe it's still available online. She had a great book she put out on stelliums. And as a person who has a stellium natally, I have to say I'm always excited when people write about it or talk about it. And in her mind, that middle planet, the planet closest to the midpoint in the stellium, tends to be kind of the primary domino that sets everything else into motion. So having Jupiter in the middle here, to me, is very impactful. Jupiter expands everything it touches, right? And as Anne was mentioning, it doesn't always know about limitation. That's not Jupiter's strength. Jupiter's strength is hit the gas pedal and let's keep going and let's expand and let's keep growing. So I feel like, again, we have this fluid motion of, on the one hand, there's so much power and energy about dreaming the big dream. Don't let the blocks of quote unquote reality stop us from dreaming the big dream. But on the other hand, don't confuse what is the dream and the vision with what is the reality of the moment. Like the dream is important to have a guidepost of where we're headed and what we're moving towards, but also having some clarity about where am I now? What do I need to make that dream a reality? I think is important. And with Neptune being here, I just feel like it's so easy to get lost, to get confused, to get blindsided, to not see when we are floating from one side to the other, to not necessarily notice if we're caught up in fantasy or if we're caught up in disillusionment, if we're pulling away and retreating, or are we swimming towards people? That to me is sort of that when Neptune, and of course Neptune's been in Pisces for some time, this isn't new, but having all this energy here just seems to me like a lot of huge opening happening, dropping our guard, opening up, but also maybe having it happen not in the ways that we expect or planned. I don't know. I'm ready to pass the baton now because I've been talking a lot. Again, I feel like I'm caught up in Pisces, even though we're not at the new moon yet. I can feel myself just flowing and rambling and doing this back and forth between my left and my right hemisphere of my brain. It feels very Pisces.
It does, doesn't it? It's very flowy. I mean, it's interesting new moon because the Jupiter and Neptune that you mentioned as well, they're both rulers of that new moon. Jupiter is traditional ruler of the Pisces, and Neptune is the modern ruler. So however you want to look at it, astrology, you have a ruler of that lunation in the same sign. So it's incredibly powerful. I think for Pisces, I like the words or the keywords illusion and dissolution, disillusion or dissolution as well. And this is kind of how I see this new moon and this new month that starts now, or that will have that quality of what are the dreams that we have. Again, we've been talking about Jupiter going through Pisces, and I think that still applies. What are the dreams that we have? But also, what are the dreams that we had? And now we're coming to the place where we're actually becoming a dissolution. And they just dissolve. You know, they dismantle. They just disappeared. And we no longer have faith in those. Maybe we believed in utopia, whether it was in our workspace, politically, we believed in something, and that now we kind of see that it's actually dissolving. It's not there anymore. So I think this is new moon where there will be a lot of breaking down of those dreams we had, but also opportunity to use that Piscean energy that Kimberly was just talking about to build new dreams and hold on to faith and hold on to hope that something new, that there is a new world, that there is a new, and when I, talk about new world, it might be a vision of a new relationship that you have, or a vision of a new career if you're completely disillusioned with the job that you're doing at the moment. But there is element for me of something dissolving this month, of something disintegrating with that Piscean energy, of us seeing something and being, and it might come with element of hurt, of that element of pain where we just had that dream, whether it was the dream of having, this amazing relationship that we are, and suddenly we become seeing that person for who that person is, and never saw that before. Neptune has that quality of the fog. If you've ever been in a really thick fog, either drove through a fog or of being on the sea where there's a thick fog, you really can't see up from down, let alone, directions. It's really disorientating. Again, this is a keyword for Pisces. It can be disorientating. And I think this is that kind of month where that fog might be there. There might be a lot of, am I going left? Am I going right? What is right and what is left? What is up and what is down? What's happening? And whether, again, when we're talking about those archetypal energies, they manifest on all levels. I think all three of us agree that with this kind of famous quote, as above, so below, it manifests within us. It manifests within our own world of our own family and friends and our jobs. It manifests within our own countries, and it manifests on a global scales as well. So what is it that we're becoming disillusioned in this month? And what is it that we can draw on that Jupiterian energy? And I love that, Kimberly, never heard about this stellium and that domino effect in the middle. But I love that we can actually expand that with the Jupiter. We can expand and we can say, okay, if something, if my dreams, they just had an expiration date, what are the other ones that I can build this month?
And yeah, and also I want to throw out there too, the idea that with all this Pisces energy, there's also such potential for healing. As we, we talk about this a lot with the balsamic moon being the end of each monthly lunation phase. We talk about the potential for healing and release. But I also feel like, if in astrology, our quote unquote, our year begins with the sun's ingress into Aries, then on some level it's ending in Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac. It's bringing whatever cycle we've been in, it's bringing it to some kind of conclusion, completion, release. And so with this Pisces energy, and especially on the heels of, we have been talking the last few weeks about how much Capricorn has been up in the sky, how all the stelliums, the planets going through Capricorn, right? So if there's been all of this intense work separation, feeling confined, feeling controlled. Now is a time to really embrace, okay, what do I need to let go so that we can have healing? And I especially am thinking something you said, Monica, made me think about, this idea of maybe this is also about the world uniting in some way, shape, or form, like recognizing we see all the things that divide us. And now we're seeing all the illusions, like, perhaps in the Ukraine, thinking that a country has agreed to back us and now they're not. Maybe somebody's point of view might be they're not backing us the way we thought. And that can create great pain and suffering. It's not just disillusionment of the mind, right? But that disillusionment of the mind creates pain and suffering in the heart. And what comes after disillusionment for me with Pisces is often that's the space where healing now can begin, because I'm letting go of the things that had me bound to some mindset or some way of being. And now we have freedom to kind of be fluid, to think outside the box, to float, and to start to heal the heart. My hope is that with all this energy in Pisces, that there's more of a push, more of a global movement. I think that perhaps as we're on the heels of this approaching new moon, this could be some of the energy we're seeing about a lot of people protesting that they want their governments to support the Ukraine, that we see happening on the media, this idea of coming together, because it's Pisces. Nothing should separate us when we're in Pisces. We are one, is kind of the highest vibration for me of that Pisces energy. Anne, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when I was looking at this chart, I also noticed that there are a lot of feminine energy. There's not many masculine planets there. So even if the planets are moving forward and we're going forward, it still gives me like a feeling of that we're inside, that we're processing a lot of things that are not shown still, or that are not going to be concrete. So that's like it's a more also more of a passive energy still with these placements. So yeah, and about the disillusion and facing disappointments that needs to redirect to something new. I think that's really important with fishes, and to really acknowledge that even if it's a disappointment, it needed to happen. I needed to realize something new, and now I can go on, and I can build another dream or another way of doing things.
Love what you just said, because that new moon is sextiling Uranus, so that kind of flash of awareness that something is not as I dreamed it would be, that can be painful and shocking, but that pain can be healed, and we can move on. And again, Kimberly, you've mentioned that the Capricorn energy, so I'm just going to go straight for it. We have, at the time of the new moon, we have Mars conjunct Pluto very closely, and Venus is just right there as well, just a degree away from that conjunction. So we have a god of war, Mars, the warrior of the planets, and we have Pluto, Hades from the mythology, the god of underworld, and they're meeting together. So we have the energy of rage and boundaries and fighting and competitiveness meeting the god of power. So that's explosive energy on its own. And that is something that we can see in our lives. We can see that on a global scale with boundaries being violated, boundary being crossed, that there is this push for power and there is a power struggle. And there's something that we've already discussed in regards to nodal axis, and we probably will mention that at the end of the episode, that there is an imbalance happening and there is a power struggle going on in the world on so many levels. We can see that again with the situation with Ukraine and Russia, but we can also see that power struggle between Russia and the countries that are trying to help Ukraine in the way they can or they feel they can. And that power struggle is there. But this is not isolated. That energy is not isolated just to nations. We feel that in our own bodies. I've been saying to my colleagues I had a session 2 weeks ago with a supervision session with my colleagues, and I was saying I can feel waves of grief and rage within me. And it's interesting to observe that, how the old pains and old disappointments coming up, and they turn into grief or rage in our own lives. That can be something that traumatic that happened to you in a childhood, that might be a current situation at work, or in relationship with family members, with friends. Where do you have the power struggle? This is a question for the next 18 months that we have with the nodal axis, but this is also what Pluto and Mars are highlighting now. That rage, that anger, that feeling that we had of disempowerment can come up and just blow up. So the question, about being a bully or being bullied, which one are you? Are you somewhere on that line? Power struggle is not just black and white. Sometimes it can be very subtle. Do you examine how do you interact with others? What is that relationship? Venus is just right there. It's talking about the relationship to power, to anger, to aggression. But what I love is, Anne, what you just brought, and I haven't thought about it before this session, but when you mentioned that there is so much feminine energy, yes. What I love about this conjunction is that Venus will go, and then she will conjunct Pluto, and she will conjunct Mars, and she will have, so to speak, the last say in that. And maybe this is my disillusion or illusion or my fog, but this is the way I see the feminine movement coming up. This is what I see people actually rising and saying no. The war is a lot about masculinity in that kind of negative, toxic sense, and patriarchal approach to how we see things, how we see the world, the earth, the other women or the other people as our property. And there is this kind of feeling of we need that change. And Venus for me in Capricorn, and going over those two planets as well, it's talking about our relationship to power, our relationship to one another, our relationship to our spirituality. That conjunction in Capricorn is actually semi-square to the new moon. So again, there is that connection, close connection actually with that new moon. So that new cycle starts something. There is the disillusion, but there is a lot of power, and it's the power that's bubbling underneath. This is the Persephone that comes out from the underworld. She's done with boys playing, with Hades kidnapping her, and then Zeus not doing enough. This is the power of the feminine energy. And what I mean feminine, I've always kind of trying to make a disclaimer, especially in astrology. I don't mean female. I just mean feminine energy. I do not assign gender to that. But this is the energy of we're coming out from the underworld and we want to claim our own power. She will go through Pluto. She will go through Mars. She will claim her own power. She will claim her own aggression, and she will assert her own boundaries. And I see this happening on so many levels with Venus transit now, with Uranus being in Taurus. There is that rise when I think we will say enough. At least that's my hope, and maybe that's my illusion or fantasy that I have, but that is my hope and that is my prayer.
I think that's beautiful, and I'm there with you. I think that's a gorgeous visualization of where we can take this energy. I really love the fact that you brought up that there's a lot of grief being released, because I think a lot of times in astrology we talk about Pluto and focus on the power and the disempowerment, and with Mars it's always about the anger, and certainly those are rife right now. But yeah, this idea that grief can also, it's, to me, is so Plutonian. The loss that we've experienced, the disempowerment we've experienced in the past, the things that were taken from us, those emotions, those griefs can still be very entwined, very much a part of us. And with this contact, I agree that a lot of this now can be coming up and being released and coming forward. And I also love the fact that, so we've got Mars and Pluto at 27 degrees of Capricorn. And the day after the new moon on the 3rd, like you said, Venus comes. She has the final say. She'll be at that 27 degrees of Capricorn. And I just love this idea of healing, cooperation, a cohesion, like a soothing salve. How do we work together? And in my mind, I keep thinking, if we've got all this Pisces energy, it's the new moon, that's the beginning of a cycle. And now we've got Mars, Venus contacting that Pluto. Maybe it's about, the old structure didn't work. So it's time to let that go, mourn that, and we get to create a new structure going forward. And Anne, when you were talking about all the feminine signs here, it was like, I want to do the mic drop. That just, why did I not see that? I love the fact that everything's in these receptive signs except for Chiron, Saturn, Mercury. So that kind of says to me, maybe this is about not dismantling the patriarchy, is a phrase I hear used a lot in many of my groups. And maybe this isn't so much about tearing it down. Maybe it's about, okay, how do we restructure going forward in a way that brings, whether you want to call it the divine feminine, whether you want to call it, a more cohesive, holistic approach, but less of this bullying, less of this totalitarianism, less of this. And the other thing I want to throw out there is that sometimes the bully is inside. It isn't always the bully out there. A friend of mine did a lecture one time about the bully in the brain, talking about how anxiety, the structure of anxiety in the brain, and how it just how the synapses will keep going and get bigger and bigger and louder. And with all this Pisces energy, I feel like anxiety can really come up from whatever source triggered that for us. But this anxiety can really be there. And I've noticed for me, that's super strong. And I'm starting to sort of fight back and starting to not just fight, but internally dialogue with myself about, okay, how do we move forward? Instead of it being a fight for power about who's going to win internally, how do I get all those different parts of the personality to work together, to cooperate, to move beyond a place of anxiousness?
Beautiful. I think it's really interesting to even see how we react to the energy and how we record the podcast. So the last full moon in Leo, completely different energy, fired up. We all kind of very excited about it. And even now that we record, it's just a different vibe to it. It's really interesting to even see that, how we react to this and how we record that. It's interesting. I have to say, I'd love to hear Anne's thoughts about that Saturn and Mercury in Aquarius. There is a conjunction there. And like you said, Kimberly, that's the only two planets that are, except for Chiron, that are in masculine or active sign. So Anne, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I thought about Kimberly, when you talked about the bully in the brain, and I thought about how we think and how we structure things, and looking at Saturn and Mercury together, and it's the only planets that are in masculine signs right now, and also almost squaring the nodal axis. So when thinking about going forward and what's important, also if you think about the broader perspective, I think those two are important really much, and they can be a bit of a key planets here too. Then how do we actually, many very good writers have Saturn Mercury conjunction or square in their chart. There are people that are excellent with words, that can really pinpoint and say the right things. And I think that right now it's very, very important that you can say and express things, and think about how you express things, and think about the bigger pictures there and the bigger structures. And I think that that's why these two might have a key role in this chart. I also think that this situation right now is showing us a new way of also showing how we feel about things. They're not only one level. There are new ways of resistance to things. There are new ways of saying we don't consent. Just thinking about the group Anonymous, I don't know how much they can do, but still another way of saying that this is another way of saying that we are not doing this. We are not consenting with what's happening. There are new ways of reacting that have not been used before, that have not been as visible. And this is also interesting with this Aquarian planet, that we get to understand the bigger picture of this from another perspective that hasn't maybe been done in this way before. And I mean, it can be, I mean, there are many negative aspects here, but there are also kind of interesting new ways of dealing with things that hasn't been maybe so, well, I haven't been thinking of them in this way before than during this situation. So that's something about those two planets that come to my mind.
Yeah.
I love listening to you. I mean, you always have such an incredible insights into stuff like that. And I love the word that you use, consent, because I think that fits so well with that Pluto, Mars, and Venus as well. It's suddenly we're waking up to actually saying, I can put the boundaries, I can make a consent as well, whether it is a boundary of my own country, or whether it's a boundary of my own body, or whether the boundary of my own emotional life, that, you know, we need to start setting up those and asserting those boundaries and asking for consent. I've noticed that I've been doing something recently that I haven't done before. I am very huggable person. I love hugs. I think they're good for you. I do give really good hugs. But I've never asked people, are they okay to receive it? And because of the whole pandemic and kind of not touching, and obviously some people are still very protective of their own space, I've started asking people, do you mind if I give you a hug? Would you like a hug? And there is something waking up. I mean, this is just a silly example, because when I see my friends, I just want to squeeze them and kiss them and just hug them, because they're my family. But I never ever thought, 5-10 years ago, that for some people that might not be comfortable. And suddenly the kind of idea of independence, of consent, and that's a wrong word, because it's not sudden. It's sudden for me. And it's emerging within the collective stronger and stronger, saying, you need to ask for permission on so many levels. This is something that obviously has been happening for generations now on different levels, when we say we want to be part of the movement. And I think this is the part of what you were saying as well with the consent and revolution. Saturn and Uranus started that last year. I think they started breaking the mold. And what you said, I just took a note about the structure, Kimberly, and revolution. I was thinking about that. There is a difference between restructuring something and revolutionizing it. When you're restructuring something, it's kind of like, you're going into a prison and you're painting or changing the wall, and you're painting the wall and you're putting some flowers. It's still a prison. Effectively, you haven't changed the whole structure of it. You might just change something inside the structure. When you revolutionize, you basically tear everything off and build something new. And I think there's so many other cycles that began over the last couple of years, which we haven't mentioned in our podcast yet. We might do maybe like a special episode in the future. There are so many huge cycles that started, the 200-year cycle of the earth element, that talk about a new world beginning. There is something new emerging. And for that, we need that revolution. We need to tear away the structure that just do not work. Do not repaint over the dead corpses. Do not restructure something that was designed to keep you prisoner, that was designed to work against you, that was designed to keep you down. You can't restructure that, because by design, it does not work. It has to be ripped away and something new has to be brought in a place. But something new has to come from that Piscean vision, from sensitivity, from connection with that, Venus in Capricorn. That has to come from love and connection, and relationships with each other, with Earth, with the universe on a whole. Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent that I went on. Apologize, but really, when you just spoke about that, it just set me off. So that's me for today, for this episode. I think I just gave a lot of my own visions and my own hope for the next cycle that's happening.
I feel like with this chart and the last 2 or 3 that I've looked at for this year, it's like every time I look at charts this year, I keep coming back to this feeling like we are in between, in Tarot, we're in between the Tower card and the Star card. And the idea in Tarot is that the Tower is what you were saying. It's that everything gets torn down. The Tower is crumbling. Everything comes down. It gets torn down, dissolved, right? It's not like we can just paint the wall and have it be prettier. The wall has to be gone. And once everything comes down, what follows then is, now let's dream. What do we want to create? What is the structure we will now put in place that replaces what was, which I think is what I was trying to allude to. And so I feel like I keep looking at this year as where we've seen a lot of things get torn down, and more needs to be torn down in terms of society structures, international structures, here domestically in the US, a lot of our structures. But we haven't totally finished. The Tower hasn't completely come down yet. And it's scary when you're in those places. It is scary when we don't know what will be the replacement yet. It is scary when all this is happening. And yet there's that star, right, that can guide us, that dream of something better can replace this. And as long as we stay focused on that, something better can come forward. And if it's coming from our collective mindset, our true authentic selves, if it's coming from this Aquarian energy of how do we all, because I think that's the answer, is no one person, no one group is going to figure out how to move us forward. Collectively, we have to all come together to figure out how to go forward. And historically, patriarchy has tried to, the shadow side of patriarchy has done a lot of bullying and pushing and trying to separate us, and using fear to keep different groups marginalized. And so I really believe that as this is that big arc. It's not something that happens in a day, a month, a year. It's a new cycle, right, of how we are all going to work collectively. And so every time I see these Aquarian signatures, like Saturn, the ancient ruler of Aquarius, conjuncting that Mercury, it's more planting seeds that move us towards that. It's like people, as you said, Monika, waking up and starting to see something else needs to be here. That's my soapbox rant.
There's so much more that can be said about that, with the feminine waking up, with collective coming together, and people actually, that Piscean energy again, sorry, just to go back there, it's about collective. It's about understanding our interconnectedness. That's the power. That semi-square to Pluto, that is the power that has been taken away from us, because a small group of, effectively white men is trying to tell us that we are separate, that women's issues are not the same as LGBTQ issues, or are not the same things as social justice issues. And we all, have been told that lie, that illusion, that we are separate, that we are fighting for different things, where in fact we are all interconnected. And when we realize that, the power that we will have to change will be volcanic.
Yeah.
But we need to see that dream, and we need to use that interconnectedness, that relationship with Venus, that energy, to really understand what we can do and how powerful we can be.
So I feel like
social movements, sorry, I wanted just to finish, nothing's changed because the government decided to change or to give away, power and liberties to people. Things change because people came together. Regardless where you look at the world, people came together over centuries and they fought for their rights. They marched, they fought, they created riots, whatever it was, to be heard. And when they were heard, they were given those rights. But maybe it's not about asking for those rights anymore. Maybe it's actually coming together and creating our own rules, not asking the powers that be to give us a little bit of piece of their pie, but actually saying to them, you don't work, we will organize ourselves and we'll create something new. So sorry, Kimberly, just wanted to finish that one.
I'm glad you did. Beautiful. So I think that all this talk about power moves us into touching on the nodal axis. We've been talking about it a lot the last few months, since in January we switched to the South Node in Scorpio and the North Node in Taurus. And the week after our new moon, that fast-moving Mercury will be squaring that nodal axis. So either of you have some thoughts you want to throw out, that whether it's something new or it's just repeating something we've talked about before about our nodes. It's our last item before we go into practical tips.
I mean, for me, it's like I've been saying, it's about that power struggle. What are our values? What are we standing for? And what is that we are afraid to stand up to? And I think, again, that's kind of shows on a world stage where we have a power struggle, not just between Russia and Ukraine, but between Russia and the rest of the world. And then the question is, what are the values that each country's, hold dear, and what are they willing to stand up for? And how are they willing to stand up? And it's the same thing in our micro lives, in our individual lives. Are you willing to stand up to a bully at work? Are you willing to stand up to a boss who is a bully? Are you willing to stand up, at school? Is it safe for you to do so? What are those values that we hold dear, Taurus, that we just have to fight for? I am really curious about that new North Node moving through Taurus at the same time Uranus is marching through that sign. Because again, that's for me, again, is that Promethean spark to divine feminine emerging. I don't know how else to put it, but for that force of love, of being connected, of understanding how we all one with the food that we eat, with the animals, with the air that we breathe, with the water that we drink, that we all connected, and we become disconnected, we become commodity. And when we understand the sacredness of that connection, something else happening, and the new world is possible. But whether that will break us or make us, it's yet to be seen, I think, for me. So that's my thoughts on the nodal axis.
I like that. It'll make us or break us. It's so Uranian. I love that. Anne?
When a planet is squaring the nodes, I think that we have the possibility to connect the past with the future. And I think that here in these situations and coming situations, we will go back to the history. We will go back and repeat maybe something, repeat in our minds at least what has been before, how can we redo this in this situation. So it will connect previous structures with the new structures that we will choose what we want to do with.
Cool. I am fascinated by the fact that once again, we have so much energy. All the planets are on in between the nodes, are on one side of the nodal axis. They're not spread out. That seems to be happening over and over as this year is taking off. And I love the fact that everything's moving from the south node to the north node. I feel like this, to me, feels like it's energy about we can learn from the past. We can release perhaps some of the old unhealthy power structures that South Node being in Scorpio. And as we move towards what do we collectively value? I also think, though, that with this shift of the nodal axis, what I've noticed a lot in the world around me is the power grabs for money, for thinking about that North Node being in Taurus and being our resources, and what we spend on resources. I have already seen so much, yet one more time, the price gouging that happens. Oh, there's a crisis. There's going to be an oil shortage because of things happening in Russia and the Ukraine. Prices were already shooting up here before anything had happened. Like, it's that let's do the use fear as a way for people who want to make more money. And I realize the situation's much more complicated. I'm dumbing it down, but it just feels like the old structure that wants to operate from a place of corrupt control, overpowering and disempowering others in that process, not healthy power, but unhealthy power, greed. It just feels like it's making that last ditch effort of let's get all we can. And I'm waiting to see what happens when, as Monika said, Uranus is conjunct that North Node. I think that everything that's happening since Uranus went into Taurus back in 2018, was it? Everything since then is like a buildup. It's that drip that keeps going and eventually can make a hole in the stone. And I think that we're going to see an explosion of some of what all of this is about, and how do we move forward when that conjunction is exact. So one more time, I'm just kind of watching and seeing things build. Speaking of building, I noticed I've been reading a lot more about minor aspects. And particularly, I've been very interested lately with the semi-sextile, because there just has been a lot of them happening. We talked about that with the last full moon episode. And one of the things I came across is it is a building energy, that it's the idea that things may not necessarily take action in that moment, but it's definitely part of the storyline of things building and growing. So I'm just going to kind of keep watching that and see how things progress. Shall we move into wrapping up with our final tips, or does anyone have burning thoughts before we do that?
I'm happy to kick off the tips.
Go for it.
So with everything going on on a global scale, there is a lot of and fear coming up. So the two tips that
I'm sorry, Monika.
I will
the technology, you broke up a little. Would you mind just starting over again?
Sure.
Thanks.
So with everything going on a global scale, there is a lot of grief and fear and anger coming up to the surface, both like I said, on a global scale, but also in our own private lives. So the two tips that I'll put today, and something that I'm trying to do, is one is looking after my own well-being, and understanding what information I allow and consume, and what information I'm blocking, because there's just so much going on out there that it can be overwhelming. And when it's overwhelming, it can prevent us from taking actions. And I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to take actions and to participate in that changing world. So I don't want to be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of fear that is out there. So I am limiting what I'm reading, where I'm reading, which source I'm picking up, and at which time maybe of the day I'm giving myself permission to go in and read those news. I do not have news as a notification on my phone, but I am giving myself permission to go in. I don't do that first thing in the morning, and I don't do that before I fall asleep at night. I try to give myself permission during the day to have that, to absorb, to read what's happening, so I am informed. And just trying to be careful with my body, with everything's going on with the Taurus as well. Be careful with my body, with the structures of my body, listening to my body. New moon, like Kimberly mentioned, it's the time of, embodying those energies. So looking at how those energies showing up in my own bodies and what I can do about it. The second thing is actually something that I mentioned, the consent. I am starting to review, and it's been going on again for a few years now, but more and more, I guess, the consent that I give. And that is, again, on so many levels, not just the consent that I give to people to be within my sphere and energy. I review the people who are within my sphere, and I've always done that. I'm very aware that having relationships, it's an energetic connection, and it can be draining. So I'm very careful of who I am surrounded by, but also who I am giving a consent on the bigger scale. Which news channels do I watch? Where does my Taurian, where does my money and value go? Which shops do I shop? Which corporations do I support? Which politicians do I support? How can I be active participant in that changing world just by giving consent? So this is the two things that I would say I'll be looking out for this new moon as well. Just seeing where is that energy flowing, and am I contributing to building the new world and building the new future, or am I contributing to disillusionment and disintegration of the old? So this is what I'm looking at, especially this month.
I think I have a bit simpler one. I mean, I just want to go back to the basics, what I was talking about. Where is Fishes in your chart? Where do you have this new moon, this energy? How do you connect to it? How do you find it in your own life? And do you feel that you have an outlet for the fission energy? Or is it something that you maybe want to develop? And how does it feel with this new moon and this energy right now? So it wasn't more, it was quite simple.
Powerful, nonetheless.
I'm going to tag on to that, Anne, and say also that I'm looking at really focusing and being aware about this Pisces energy, letting myself to be open, but also letting myself release, just letting the emotions that my body has been holding on to go. Kind of bringing some mindful awareness to what am I currently absorbing. I feel like with all this watery Pisces, it's easy to just keep taking in. So I'm trying to just be aware of, okay, what am I holding? And it doesn't have to be the huge, I'm going to do the bath and I'm going to do the candles. And I'm, often on a new moon, it feels like it has to be an elaborate ritual. No, this is just, 5-6 times a day, just stopping to breathe, noticing, listening to my body and what needs a gentle touch. Where's the tension? If it's on my shoulder, I'm just going to make contact, touch, breathe, let it go. And my quote that I have found that I've been repeating to myself, sometimes it's okay if the only thing you did today was breathe. And that's by Yumi Sakugawa. I'm probably butchering the name, but that just spoke to me of this energy of it's okay sometimes to just be, and that it doesn't always have to be about action and doing, that sometimes I can just be, and just being means that what I've been pushing down, especially for me, I push it down in some part of my body, right? It's coming up. If I'm just going to breathe and be, then I let it come up and let it go. And so just being aware and releasing these trapped emotions in the body so that there's room for all the other things I'm unconsciously absorbing. Yeah.
Great tips, I think.
I think so too. And hopefully all of these ideas will carry us through Pisces season.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks for the next full moon, and we can check in at that point to see how everyone's doing, being fluid and flowing and visualizing with all this great Pisces energy out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. Astro Chat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support Astro Chat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.